Hello! For those of you who don't know, my name is Katie. I am a full-time working parent of two gorgeous little girls. And I have made these videos for my sister Emily, who lives on the other side of the world. And the purpose of them is to give her tips, tricks and advice, all the things I feel like I've learned, experienced over the last 3 years. And turn them into little videos that she can watch whenever she wants, watch when's most appropriate, or delete and ignore at her leisure. So hi Emily, this is a video for you all about pregnancy. I have notes in front of me, which is why I'm going to keep looking down, and I'm too lazy to do edity things and cool shit that other people do on YouTube. So I'm going to mess up, I'm going to have hiccups and things, but roll with me. So pregnancy, so exciting that you're pregnant. I cannot, literally am so excited. For anyone else who's watching this, both Emily and I have been extremely lucky that we both managed to get pregnant first time, had no challenges and things like that. Even though we both had various different kind of hormonal things. I have polycystic ovaries, and we were both super lucky. So I'm not going to talk at all about the kind of trying to conceive bit, and for anyone out there, my heart goes out to you. But yeah, I'm not going to talk about any of that bit because I don't have any advice or anything to share. Both Emily and I went for a similar approach. Emily took my advice, which is just do it lots, all the time. That obviously doesn't work for everyone, but anyone who is out there trying to follow an app and work out when you're ovulating, don't bother. Just do it all the time. Like, that's the way to get pregnant. You have sex. Everybody knows that. So that is my only advice on that. Okay, pregnancy. So exciting. Weird and strange things happen to your body, and it's all kind of meant to be normal. I found it really helpful to have a book that talks about what happens each week, that goes through, like, this week, this is happening. What it did have, so I had the Mayo Clinic book, which I know, Emily, I told you about, and I also used the Pregnancy Plus app, which I found really good and kind of breaks down each week for you. I found it really helpful because it also told you about what kind of other symptoms you might experience each week. The thing that I found a bit difficult with that was, turns out everything is common. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's not a sign that something else is a problem. So anything that you're not sure about, I would 100% say, like, talk to your healthcare provider. In the UK, we obviously have the midwife system. I don't know what things are like where you live. But find out in your first appointment who you ask all the weird and wonderful questions to. As I say, in the UK, we have a good midwife system, and there's a phone number that you just call, and they will give you advice and things, which is super helpful. And always bring up everything in your midwife appointments when you do have them, is ask all the weird stuff. I was literally like, I have weird lumps in my boobs. Is that normal? Turns out it is. It's just that the milk production comes in, and so sometimes you can get a blocked milk duct even before the baby arrives. It's mental and it's weird, but it's so much better to be like, this is a weird thing, what's the sign of? Another great example of that is, it was really normal, I was told, or really common, that it might hurt when I wee. I definitely was like, yeah, I'm pregnant, weird shit happens to my body, that must be normal. Turns out I had a really bad urine infection, and I just thought it was like, oh, well, everything hurts when you're pregnant, and had to go on a lot of antibiotics, and obviously was in pain, but obviously, well, I say obviously, not everyone wants to be on antibiotics when they're pregnant, various issues with that, and like differencing in opinion. Obviously I had antibiotics and my girls are both fine. That's obviously a sample of one. Speak to your doctor, understand how you feel about it. But yeah, so if it hurts when you wee, while that may be common and normal, isn't a reason not to talk to your healthcare provider and stuff like that. So yeah, so that was my first point, is that, like, weird and strange things happen to your body, but always talk to people about it, even if it feels like a really basic thing or something that feels common, not normal. The other thing is to keep reminding yourself that your body was made to do this and it knows what it's doing. Some people don't like this line. I loved it. I found it super helpful that, like, if I did absolute nothing, my body would still make a baby all by itself. Like, you don't have to do anything. So, like, yes, it's wonderful if you take folic acid. Yes, it's amazing if you eat spinach twice a day. Like, all of these things are such great advice, but do not stress yourself about it, because your body's gonna make a baby. That's what it knows what to do. That's what it's doing. And it knows how to do that. So don't stress, but also know that like your body is made to this. This is super exciting. It's gonna work it out by itself, and it's gonna know how many fingernails to make, and like that's so exciting. And that's, I found really like reassuring, I guess, that it was like, oh, okay, this is what I've kind of been gearing up for. This is what I've been excited and waiting for. And the other big thing that I had just kind of on the body issue was having spent quite a long time kind of trying to maintain my weight, because of the polycystic ovaries, I have to keep on top of my weight. Otherwise it can make my symptoms worse, which could lead to fertility issues. I have spent so long making sure my weight is on track. I weigh myself every week. It's a personal thing. It helps me keep things on track and it works for me. Not necessarily for everyone, but so I found it quite hard when I started gaining weight, and that when I'd stand on the scales I'd put on weight, but then weirdly also found it hard if I didn't put on weight for a week. That was I not eating enough, was the baby not growing, and particularly when you get to like week 8, 9, 10, when you're feeling pregnant, you're feeling bloated, but you don't look pregnant, you don't have like a massive bump, but you maybe don't fit in some of your clothes. I find that stage really hard. And I guess I say that to be like, when you get to that stage, or if you're feeling that way, like, I think it is common. As I say, not normal, but common. But that's also okay to talk about and okay to feel that way. I think like once I got into the swing of things and once I started to kind of feel okay about it, I felt better. But I think like making sure you're taking the time to like appreciate your body and know that what it's doing is amazing. And you know, I really tried to reinforce to myself that like every time I felt sick or felt uncomfortable in clothing, that it was like, yeah, but that's because I'm still pregnant. That's because it's still happening. That's because a baby's being made. And they were all kind of little reassuring things that when you're not visibly big and pregnant, that you are still pregnant, and that I found that helpful. So maybe you will. Just a kind of thought. Okay, so then the other thing is to try not to jump ahead and enjoy each week as a standalone stage. This I found really hard not to be like, okay, but when I go on holiday at this place, I'll be this many weeks pregnant. And I mean, first time I was pregnant during COVID, lol, got pregnant in lockdown 1, gave birth in lockdown 3, would not recommend. And luckily you don't have to. But so I would really be like, okay, well at Christmas I'll be this many months pregnant, so I'll be this many weeks, so I'll probably be about this big, so I'll probably, and it was like, just focus on this week now and what's happening and how you're feeling and how exciting that is. Like I can still remember little bits around week 14 and how I was feeling, and when I had the first kick at 22 weeks and that just being so special, and you know, and enjoy each week. And I guess this kind of comes back to the beginning of like having an app or a book that talks about each week and the stage you're in, and kind of spending time feeling that week pregnant and what that means. I kept a weekly diary and I found that really helped. So I had in like how many weeks there was, what the key things that the app had said or the book had said was going to happen this week. So whether the lungs were growing or it's always the brain. The brain is always, it's a key week for developing the brain. But also how I was feeling, and then anything that happened, any appointments. I kept notes from all my appointments. I found it quite helpful to remember. I felt like particularly towards the end of my pregnancy, my memory wasn't as sharp. And someone would say something and I'd worry that I then felt emotional about it. So they mentioned the possibility of induction, and I was worried I was getting pressured into being induced, and I wasn't sure how I felt about that, and I was then kind of misremembering the information they'd given me. So I found that keeping notes in all my appointments and keeping them in my weekly diary was super helpful. So I would recommend doing that as well. Exercise and squats. I know you're already doing this, Emily, so we're all good here, but I would recommend to anybody to continue doing as much exercise as you were doing before. And if you weren't doing any before, walk every day without fail. 10, 15 minutes, increase it up to half an hour, whatever you want to do, walk. And just continue doing as much exercise if you already do more exercise. I was quite into my fitness before, particularly with COVID, was cycling everywhere and hiking every weekend, carried on all of that. Managed to cycle until I was about 25 weeks with my first one. I was bigger with my second baby, so stopped cycling about 20 weeks. But also I had then moved back to London, which is where I live, and was commuting to work by cycling. And it, at 20 weeks, started to feel a bit dangerous. Obviously, no one wants to be hit by a bus at any point anyway, but it felt like that maybe not have been a safe idea. So I stopped cycling a bit early, but I carried on running all the way through to 32 weeks, both times, and then did home workouts. I will recommend various things. I'm obviously not being paid by advertising, and I'm obviously not plugging anyone that is paying me to. Lol, I wish I was. But Body Fit by Amy is a channel on YouTube. Would definitely recommend her. I watched all of her prenatal videos. I still do some of her postnatal exercise videos. I really liked her, but just find who you like. And even if you're just doing like 20-minute short workouts and squats, lots of squats. Squats will help. You also have a hormone called relaxin. It sounds like they made it up. Obviously they made it up, you know what I mean. That goes in your body when you're pregnant, which helps your pelvis open up to allow the baby to come out. Obviously do your own medical research if you want to know more. But it means that your limbs and particularly your legs will kind of open up a lot more, and your hips will move a lot more easily, so you can do much lower squats, which is a weird sensation. But the more you kind of encourage your body to open up, the more you encourage your hips to open up, particularly in your third trimester, the better it's going to be and the easier it's going to be for your baby. But the other big thing that exercise and squats do is improve your pelvic floor. 100% do your pelvic floor exercises. In the UK there's an app called Squeeze, which helps you remember to do your pelvic floor. I'm sure you can have the same app in Canada. I can't see why there wouldn't be. But yeah, working on your pelvic floor every day, but exercise and squats and things will really help with that as well. So I would definitely recommend that. That ties in very much with drink water. Drink all the water you can possibly handle. You will need to pee all the time in pregnancy anyway, but drinking water is you just need so much more, and it's so much better for you. And both exercise and drinking water are going to help with stretch marks. My big caveat here is stretch marks are obviously genetic. Some people are going to get them, some people are going to not, but the less weight you gain and the more water you drink, the better the situation is going to be. So it's going to make whatever you were originally going to get not as bad. I definitely didn't drink anywhere near as much water in my second pregnancy because I had a toddler or a baby around, was back in the office, was working, had so much more going on, and didn't drink as much water and did get 1 or 2 stretch marks. I am very lucky, and Emily, I hope that you have this, obviously the same genes, but and that you are equally as blessed. That in my first pregnancy I had none, and in my second pregnancy I only got 1 or 2. So I know I'm very lucky, but I gained very minimal amount of weight in both pregnancies because of doing a lot more exercise, being mindful of what I was eating and drinking lots of water, and then shed loads of water all the time. So those are my kind of advice and tips on that. As I say, unfortunately some people are just going to get them. Some of my friends have got really bad ones and they did just as much exercise and drank just as much water. But I guess all that I think maybe to take away from that is it would have been so much worse if they hadn't done those things. So I would definitely recommend doing those things. The other thing that's super helpful and I would recommend is pregnancy pillow. Obviously it's recommended that you sleep on your left side. It is not the end of the world. I feel like this was something that was really heavily drilled into me, that like you have to sleep on your left side, otherwise the baby will die. Like if you wake up and you're slept on your right side, you'll be fine. And if you wake up and you're on your back, it's fine, just roll over. Like it's definitely not as stressy as it made out, but I did find that having a pregnancy pillow was really helpful. I had a great one from a company called Koala, which was like a big long sausage that got fatter in the middle. This was super useful because I also used it as a feeding pillow once the girls were born. So I would basically just wrap it around me kind of like a donut, the thinner bits went behind me, the thicker bit was at the front, and I could rest the girls on me and then feed them. And I also then could use it as a tummy time prop, so I could rest the babies on the bigger bit, or I actually put a big pillowcase over it, and it made kind of like a sleepy head. In the UK, sleepy heads are banned, so I won't really recommend them, but my and Emily's brother lives in New Zealand and they use the sleepy head. It's not banned there and they really liked it. Each their own, but that's what I'm going to say now. But so by putting a pillowcase over it, it kind of made a bit of a kind of pod that I could put the girls on the bed so they wouldn't kind of roll off, and that was really helpful. So my point there is pregnancy pillows are great and would definitely recommend one, but having one that also is a versatile item that can be used for other things is super helpful. So that's kind of my advice on that. I mean, I will obviously make other videos on lots of other topics, but my advice on lots of things in terms of what you buy is making them as flexible as possible, because you just don't know how you're going to feel about stuff, don't know how you're going to use things, don't know what you're going to want until you're in it. So having things that are either like a basic need and then working it out as you go, or something that's like flexible and can be used as lots of different things, works really well. It's also a good way of saving money, because it's all very expensive. Okay, other thing that I would recommend is, so because I was pregnant during COVID the first time, there were loads of online courses which were great, and loads of free online courses. Ones that I would really recommend doing is, I did one we both did one, Abby and I did one on first aid, which was really good. I think I was the only person on the course who was pregnant. Everyone else had their like 4-month-old, and they did the first aid course mostly because they were worried about choking when they were coming up to weaning at 6 months. I found it useful to do whilst I had the headspace, whilst I wasn't sleep deprived, to do at that early stage. I think I was just more nervous, and I think because of COVID I was nervous about kind of how easy it would be to get doctor's appointments, how easy it would be to go to hospitals and things like that. Obviously that's less the case now that we're not in the thick of COVID, but I did find a first aid course really helpful. It may be that you have some in your local area, it may be that you can do some in person, but we did an online one and I don't think that was detrimental. We learned CPR and things like that, which was really helpful. How to deal with burns and stuff, and then obviously choking, which is a big thing with babies. So I'd recommend doing a first aid course, and then I then also did a breastfeeding course. I breastfed both my girls, as you know. I will do a separate video talking a lot more about breastfeeding. I am pro it, but I also have absolutely no judgment for anybody who formula feeds or whatever you want to do. The thing I will say at this point about breastfeeding is the biggest thing I learned is in my head beforehand, as in like whilst I was pregnant, I thought there were people who breastfed and people who formula fed, and there was maybe people who did what was called combi feeding, which is like they'd breastfeed at some times of the day and bottle feed at other times of the day. What I've learned is that is such a sliding scale of what people do, from breastfeeding to bottle feeding and everything in between. And there's bottle feeding but not formula feeding, there's exclusively pumping and giving, but like there are so many spectrum, and everyone does what works for them, and no one should ever feel any judgment or bias about what they do. I think feed your baby and get it done. It's great. But I wanted to breastfeed. I had some trouble with it, but did find that a course was really helpful in kind of mentally preparing me for it, and just understanding small things like colostrum and the milk at the beginning and kind of when your milk would come in. And I think a lot of that helped me better prepare for kind of that journey when it began. So I'd recommend doing some online courses. We also did a general kind of baby care one, which was kind of like how to bath the baby. We did NCT, which anyone in the UK will have heard of. It's quite expensive. You do 4 classes, and it teaches you about labour, it teaches you about caring for your baby. And the biggest benefit of it is meant to be that you meet local mums and dads, in your area who all have about the same due dates, normally within 2 weeks, which is amazing. Many of my friends made incredible friends from it. We didn't have a successful group, didn't form lifelong bonds, because it was over Zoom, I think. But there's also lots of other ones. There's Bump and Baby, there's Happy Baby, Happy Parent or something. So if you want to do a more like find your tribe type thing, I have no idea what that's going to be like in Canada and how hard that will be. But I would definitely recommend looking around. There may be antenatal classes at the hospital that they run. Again, in the UK, hospitals will nearly always do an antenatal class as well, because we were in COVID. Ours was online, which was kind of fine. It was like half day, but it was good. And they talked, but what I would say is they talked a lot about labour. So the hospital one in particular talks about labour, the stages of labour, when you come into hospital, pain relief, and all of those things. I would obviously recommend doing that course, but that is super helpful. But I did find that doing specific courses on other topics was really useful. So as I say, we did one on general baby care, which taught you how to like bath the baby and a bit about what to dress the babies in clothes wise. I'll do a separate video on that for you, but it is really helpful to kind of have that bit of information. So I would recommend looking for some courses, especially ones, as I say, that are like online, that you can do kind of whenever, you know, doing an evening or yeah. The other thing I would recommend is obviously YouTube. I had a lot of downtime first time because, as I say, it was COVID, we weren't going out, we weren't socializing, and work wasn't super busy. So I watched a lot of YouTube videos, found that super helpful. There's a woman called Jess Hoover, which I would recommend to anybody. I loved her. I love her videos. I still follow her on Instagram. Her youngest is almost identical age to mine. And yeah, she just makes great content that shows you kind of like how to swaddle and baby 101 and talks about sleep training, and she's got loads of amazing videos. So if you've got downtime, I'd recommend watching some of her videos as well. I found those super helpful. Okay, other things. Get an exercise ball in the 3rd trimester. Exercise ball is amazing. As I mentioned before about your relaxing and your hips being a little bit loose. Also, as your belly grows and it gets heavier and starts to push down, I got something called pelvic girdle pain, which is basically just really uncomfortable pain across your lower pelvis. And I also got sciatica, which means they trapped nerves in my back, which made it really difficult to walk. But what I found was, while walking was unbearable, and I think for some of my friends that meant they didn't exercise at all, I found that it wasn't uncomfortable to do things like squats and to do things like good mornings and things like that, and deadlifts and stuff. So that actually sitting on a bouncy ball with my legs slightly out and bouncing on the ball, like eased up all those nerves, took a lot of the pain away, was super helpful, and again helps with that like opening up the pelvic floor. You can also do transverse breathing exercises, which again, YouTube those, whilst you're sat on the bouncy ball, and those were really helpful to kind of work on your core muscles and to practice your breathing for labour. I had my exercise ball in the TV room, so in the evening when we were watching TV, I would sit and bounce on the ball. I would definitely recommend doing that. Also, again, on my buy things, because they're useful before and after you have the baby, the exercise ball was a godsend with my first. She wanted to be rocked to sleep every night. I will do a separate video on sleep and how we had such a different experience second time around. But with our first, we would hold her on her shoulder and sit on the bouncy ball and bounce. It takes all the weight off your back. It is so much more comfortable if you're there swaying or bouncing for, I'm not gonna lie, 20 minutes, sometimes up to an hour. If you're stood holding them, particularly as they get older and heavier, you're carrying 7 kilos and you're holding it. And if you're arched over or not quite stood right, and like your core's not as strong as it used to be because you've had a baby, it can be so painful and so uncomfortable. So an exercise ball was a godsend for that as well. So I'd really recommend getting one. You don't really need one before your 3rd trimester, and it will just be clutter in your house. But as you're getting into that 3rd trimester, do get a bounce ball, sit on it, bounce, and keep it. It is amazing. Okay, so then a few things kind of going more into that 3rd trimester and looking towards the latter stages of pregnancy. What I really found in my third trimester is there were lots of appointments, and that made work quite difficult. I worked with both my kids right up until the end. I had the advantage that I can work from home. In lockdown in COVID with my first, I worked on the Friday, went into labour on the Saturday, gave birth on the Sunday. So as I say, worked right up until, because I was working from home the whole time. With my second, I worked, I was planning on working until I was 38 weeks, and then I was going to have a week or two of maternity leave beforehand, but ended up working on the Friday, going to labour on the Saturday night, and having her on Sunday. Turns out that's how I do kids. So both times worked until the end, and so it was quite difficult managing appointments and things. So it's just something to be mindful of, that it feels like you have a lot of appointments and it feels like you're seeing lots of different people, but no one is giving you the information that you want, which is, when's the baby going to come? And at every appointment, all I want people to say is, oh, it looks like the baby's about 2 weeks away. Oh, it looks like the baby's about 4 weeks away. They can't tell you, and they're useless, and it's unhelpful, but that is just how it is, because you don't know. There isn't a way to know when the baby's going to come. So it's frustrating. The other thing I would say, though, is there's also not enough appointments. Like, I wanted a scan of the baby every week. I wanted to see what the baby was doing. I wanted to know exactly how she was moving. I wanted to, I couldn't believe that I wasn't being seen daily at that point. Like, I found it mental that I'd kind of go 2 weeks, and particularly towards the end, you start going to the appointments and they're like, but obviously if you have the baby before your next appointment, don't worry, like the hospital will let us know and we'll automatically cancel the appointments. I just remember being like, oh my God, like that's gonna be so long. And at some point it was just like, oh yeah, that was my last appointment, and then I had the baby. Kind of mental. But with lots of appointments and with not enough appointments, it meant there were lots of curveballs. I found, particularly with my second pregnancy, that it felt like every time I went into an appointment, there was a new curveball, there was a new complication or a new issue or something that would stress. It was so stressful, it was just like, oh, okay, well, you've now had a 33-week scan. The baby's looking a bit big, so we're going to run some more tests, and and I was like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, is that an issue? And they were like, well, it might mean that you might need to have a C-section, or you might need to be induced early, but let's not worry about those things. Let's kind of get to the end. And I was like, well, no, hang on, like, what does that mean? Like, I don't understand how I feel about that. And, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Should I be worrying? And it was a lot of, well, let's just see how things go. And so some appointments were really like, they'd say something that would make me really stressed and then wouldn't really kind of provide any more information. And then other appointments, it felt like I had to make a decision immediately. And with my first, because it was COVID, my husband wasn't allowed in the room and wasn't allowed to be there with me for a lot of them. And I found it really hard that I was expected to make decisions on the spot. So I went to my 36-week midwife appointment, and was it midwife appointment, and they I went for a 36-week scan. So with my first, I had a 36-week scan because I had low-lying placenta at my 20-week scan. With my second, I had a 33-week scan because I went to Canada to go to Emily's wedding, which feels mental, that we're now talking about your baby. But so because I'd done a long flight there and back and was so very heavily pregnant, flying, I had a 33-week scan. So back to my point. So I had a 36-week scan with my first pregnancy, and in that scan, they realized that the baby was breech. And so they asked if I wanted them to do something called ECP or EVC or something, I can't remember. But basically, turn the baby, attempt to turn the baby. They handed me this pamphlet, and which explained what was going to happen, that they were going to physically manhandle my bump and turn the baby round. There was a 50% chance it would work, a 50% chance, therefore, it wouldn't work, and a 2% chance that I would go into labour. And if I started going into labour, it would mean an emergency C-section. And they said to me in that room on my own, what do you want to do? And I felt so stressed by that and overwhelmed by that, because I didn't I didn't know this was a thing. I hadn't mentally prepared. I hadn't already thought about what I would do in this situation. I just had to decide on the spot. And I messaged one of my friends who had had a baby before, and I was like, have you ever heard of this? Like, I don't know what this means. I don't know what to do. They've told me I need to make a decision. I asked if I could go to the toilet and get some water and just have 5 minutes. And they said, of course, obviously. And I messaged her and I was like, I don't know what to do. And she sent me loads of helpful information about it. But the really important thing she told me about was something called the brain tool. I'm going to get all of this wrong, but the B stands for what are the benefits? The R stands for what are the risks? The A stands for what are the alternatives? B-R-I, I'm going to need to check. But basically it's like, what do I have to decide now? Is it immediate? That must be. And then what happens if I do nothing? So I found that super helpful. So basically they say to me, we need to do this turn thing. Do you want to do it? So my questions to them should be, what are the benefits of doing this? Okay, well, we'll turn the baby the right way round, and that will mean then I can have a normal vaginal birth instead of needing to potentially have a C-section, because they're not very keen on letting you try for a natural birth with a breech baby. Breech, means the baby's the wrong way round. It means the head up and feet down. You want them to be head down and feet up. Particularly by 36 weeks, you really want them to be head down so they can move down into the birth canal, and that's when they're engaged, is what it's called. So the benefit is they could turn her around and it could mean I could have a normal, uncomplicated vaginal birth. The risks are obviously there's a small chance I could go into labour, but actually it's a very, very small chance. There's also a risk that it wouldn't work, but if it didn't work, they could try again a week later. So by calmly asking these questions, I was getting more information. So the alternatives were that I could do nothing, or I could try natural methods to try and turn. So there was exercises I could do, I could stand on my head, I could kind of move into different positions, bouncy ball kind of things. Those were kind of the alternative methods that could be tried if I would feel more comfortable with those. Was it immediate? Did I have to make a decision then? No, they were asking for my decision because they wanted to make sure I would get an appointment that day. But I definitely could have said, no, I don't want to make a decision today. I'll call back tomorrow and then I'll just get an appointment at the next available appointment. And then N, nothing. What happens if I do nothing? And they said, well, you may find that the baby turns themselves on their own in a week or two, or it may be that you go into natural labour and then we need to make a plan at that point. But you can definitely wait a week, see how things go, and then come back in and have the same conversation. I just found so helpful using that method ongoing, because it just helps you slow down and take in the information. I'm sure there's loads of videos and stuff and more information on that tool. But yeah, it was super, super helpful. For anyone who is interested, I decided to have the turn that day because I felt that the risks were so low and the benefits were so good. I was really worried about going into natural labour whilst she was still breech. So I decided to go through with having a turn. It was incredibly painful. I was offered gas and air, but didn't need it. So while it was incredibly painful, it wasn't painful enough that I needed to do that. But I did have quite a bit of bruising and some marks kind of on the bump where they had done it. But most importantly, it was successful. She turned around, it took maybe 10 minutes. She then slotted down and got into place and was engaged pretty quickly. And I was then able to have a natural vaginal birth with no interventions. I was induced, but I will do a separate video on kind of that birth and what happened. I'll do one on obviously both births, but the turn was successful and I'm glad I had the time to ask the questions, understand the risks and benefits, the risks and benefits, and make the decision that was right for me at that time. So definitely recommend the brain tool. Next is hypnobirthing. Hypnobirthing is not for everyone. As you all know, Emily, hypnobirthing is not for me. I am not for that kind of positive thinking. I'm not that kind of person. each to their own. For so many people, hypnobirthing has been game changer. They find it super helpful. Hypnobirthing is basically understanding what is going to happen in your body, understanding a lot more, I guess, kind of building on that idea that I said at the beginning about like remembering that your body was made to do this, and focusing on things from a positive, kind of positive affirmations and breathing techniques and things to have the most natural birthing experience you can. We did a taster course on it, and I found that really useful to understand what I found useful from it, what I didn't, what I liked about it, what I didn't. I would recommend at least looking at it. There's a really good company called the Positive Birth Company, which if you are going to look at hypnobirthing, I would recommend looking at them. They have a course. We did their taster course, as I say, but a lot of people have talked very highly about their longer course. It's British, but I think all the same stuff will apply. I can't imagine it's super different in Canada. But what we did take from kind of hypnobirthing experience, and particularly the Positive Birth Company, is they have an app called Freya, which has a contraction counter, but it also has like positive affirmation recordings that you can play during labour, which I actually did find really useful. So while I'm not for hypnobirthing, or not for hypnobirthing, but it wasn't like the birth plan that we had, I did find some of it really helpful and really useful. So I would definitely recommend looking into it, understanding about it, seeing how you feel about it, because for a lot of people it did work. I knew that I wanted to have some kind of painkillers and wasn't gonna, I think some of it can be a bit anti-medicine and a bit anti-hospital, which I wanted to be in a hospital. I wanted to be around doctors. I wanted to be around anybody who would help me if anything happened to me or my daughter. I wanted to be, we chose to go to Guy's and St Thomas's, which is one of the best hospitals in the UK, and it has a children's hospital attached to it. It has the best heart experts in the country. It has some of the best paediatric doctors in the country. I wanted to be there. I am pro medicine. And so for me, a lot of some of the messaging around kind of anti-medicine, anti-midwives wasn't for me. Again, that may be UK focused. It may be that you find things are different in Canada. So worth looking at. So next, sorry, my phone's giving me a notification. Next on this then is the pain ladder. So when you are starting to get closer, one thing that is worth looking at is the pain management ladder. If you do any of the courses, they'll probably talk about it. And especially if you do anything like the antenatal one at the hospital, where they go through all the stages of labour, they will talk about it. But I would recommend looking at a kind of a pain ladder. Basically what it is you start out with the most basic level of pain relief. So weirdly, paracetamol is the one that is at the bottom, and it's like, okay, how do you feel about paracetamol? How do you feel about taking paracetamol in labour? Feel good about it? Great, whatever. I think next is a warm bath, which feels mental that isn't the first option, but either way around, like, how do you feel about it? Do you feel like that's something you're going to feel positive about or negative about as kind of part of pain management? And then it kind of works its way up and kind of gets more and more. There are certain stages in that it's like, okay, well, this is a drug that you can have, but it can have impacts on the baby. So maybe you don't feel good about that. But above it is an epidural, which that's the injection in your spine, which numbs the lower half of your body. I had an epidural in my first birth, and it was amazing. I would recommend. But I didn't in my second because she was so quick, and yeah, I didn't have time basically, and it was incredibly painful. But with both of my pregnancies, I worked my way up the pain ladder, and the level that I felt most comfortable with and was most kind of positive about is something called a TENS machine. This is something that like our mum, Emily, used for all 4 of her pregnancies, and it's kind of sort of outdated maybe. It's not a massive thing here in the UK. You can get them from Boots. I rented mine from Amazon, which I would recommend doing. but I think they're 50 quid new and they're 20 quid to rent. And so I rented it twice and that was cheaper than buying one. But you can also get them secondhand on Facebook Marketplace. I don't know about Canada, you'd have to look it up. But it is basically these sticky pads that you stick onto your back at the very beginning. As soon as you start having those first contractions, you get it on as quickly as possible. And then you have a handheld device that you push and you can go from level 1 to level 10 and it gives you little electric shots on your back. Fundamentally, it distracts you from the pain on your front by giving you these pulses on the back. I found it incredibly effective. With my second pregnancy, I started having contractions about 10 p.m. I went into hospital about midnight because it was my second pregnancy. They told me to come in a bit sooner. So I went in, they gave me some codeine, which is a stronger painkiller, to kind of take the edge off. And then I went home, I put my TENS machine on and I went to sleep whilst I had contractions with barely any painkillers because I had the TENS machine on that was creating so much kind of physical noise on my back that it kind of detracted from the front and it all sort of evened out, and it meant that I got like a good, I would say 4 or 5 hours sleep. I woke up, went into hospital and was already 7 centimeters and then had the baby 20 minutes later, as you know. I will make a separate video about the lull that was my second birth because it was incredibly quick. But yeah, the TENS machine was a lifesaver, and I had it with my first as well before the induction, and it was super helpful. So would really recommend it. So the point I'm trying to make is look into all the different methods of pain relief early. Like once you're in your third trimester, what's heading towards. Obviously, I know I said stay in the week that you're in and do, but I think being as informed as possible about all the different things that you might feel comfortable with whilst you're in a calm headspace, using the brain tool so you're not having to make those decisions at the time, is always better. I just think it gives you the headspace to do that. And I think also the more you practice the brain tool, the better you will be at using it on the fly when you're in the hospital at crunch point. This kind of feels like jumping around in a bit random order, but the other big one is perineal massage, and lol, definitely Google that. But this is the art of stretching your perineum to prepare it for childbirth. You can start from 34 weeks, and I would recommend it. I did it both times and I didn't tear either of my pregnancies. That's obviously not a guarantee, but I'm sure it helped. And definitely didn't do any harm. I got my other half to do it. You can do it yourself. There are lots of YouTube videos on how to do it and how your other half can do it. But we did it every other day, and we got some special oil, and basically it's as gross as it sounds. They put their fingers in your vagina, push down and stretch it out. And the first couple of times they do it, it's like quite uncomfortable. The oil helps, obviously. You want to be relaxed and things like that. We used to do it in the evening and we made sure we chatted at the same time so it wasn't weird. Otherwise it feels very functional. But yeah, and you do that, and it fundamentally is just stretching that skin out over time to prepare for it to be stretched heavily. And it should go some way to help avoid tearing. The other thing that sort of aligns with this, but I'll put in the breastfeeding video, is colostrum harvesting. And this is basically when you start making milk. I mean, some people make milk as early as like 16 weeks. And by milk, I mean just the like very early colostrum. You'll know when you start to kind of make milk because your nipples probably get a bit crusty, which is gross. And I really found that if I'd like been wearing a bra or top like all day, when I took it off the end of the day, it smelled a bit like Parmesan, which was really gross. But so yeah, definitely like started to notice when it was getting a bit more. What you can then do from I think 37 weeks is collect some of that milk so that you have a bit of a supply in case you have issues with breastfeeding. So I will include in breastfeeding video, but just more to mention that that's something else that kind of fits in there. Then it kind of really gets to packing your hospital bag and things. So I'll make a separate video on my hospital bag and what I put in it. I'll also send you a list of all the things I put in and kind of talk through that a little bit. But what the big thing I would say on the hospital bag is, again, in your antenatal class with the hospital or in one of your midwife appointments, ask about what the hospital will supply and provide and what it won't. One of the biggest issues I had when I was watching videos of this sort of stuff, there's loads of YouTube videos and like what was in my hospital bag, is the Americans and we're all like, you get everything at hospital, you don't need to take anything, like they provide this and they provide that. In the UK, we do not get any of that stuff. Like you have to bring everything yourself. Like you're in a communal room with 5 other people, you have one shower between all of you, you have to bring your own towel, you have to bring your own shampoo, conditioner, all that kind of stuff. If you want to shower at hospital, you have to bring nappies, you have to bring formula if you want a formula feed, you have to bring your own maternity pads, like nothing is provided. It's the NHS, like. So I don't know anything about what Canada is like, so definitely look up, find out and ask at the hospital what they provide, and that will go a long way to helping work out what you need to put in your hospital bag from that kind of point of view. But as I say, I'll make a separate video that goes into what I took in terms of like snacks and phone chargers. But so hopefully that is helpful video, but tips and tricks and advice and things around pregnancy. I'm sure there's lots of things I've forgotten. It's all a bit weird, and enjoy each week as it comes. But use the time to get informed about what's to come, but try not to get too stressed about it. You know, there's only so much you can plan, there's only so much you can prepare, there's only so much you can do in advance. I'll do another video on shopping and buying and all that kind of stuff, but like, the nice thing is there's very little you need to prepare in advance. There really is. Like, if you've not watched the video on how to bath your baby beforehand, it's fine. You don't bath your baby for the first 2 weeks anyway. And when you do come to it, you can watch a YouTube video 5 minutes before you bath the baby, and then you'll know what to do. Like, it'll be fine. But it's just, you know, while you've got the headspace to think about these things. I hope that was super helpful. If you have any questions, obviously message me. Or for anyone who isn't Emily, feel free to put on the video on the comments section and I will get back to you. And if you have any requests for any other topics you would like me to talk about, then just drop them in as well. Yeah.